Hello and welcome to the big picture. Just under a month after the Supreme Court had quashed 214 of the 218 coal block allocations done since 1993, the government has come up with a move to promulgate an ordinance to get over the crisis. The ordinance will enable the government to acquire the land of these 214 coal blocks and subsequently e-auction them to end-use private players. The government entities like public sector units, NTPC, state electricity boards will not have to go through the auction route. The government's decision is also said to benefit the state governments where the coal mines are located, as all proceeds will go to them. The ordinance is also slated to have an enabling provision for commercial mining by private players in future. We will discuss today this ordinance and its implications and how the coal and its dependent sectors will be affected by this. To discuss this, I have with me Anil Razdan, former Secretary, Union Ministry of Power, Vikas Singh, Senior Advocate and former Additional Solicitor General of India, Ashish Khetan, Leader of the Aam Aadmi Party, and Subhomoy Bhattacharya, Deputy Editor, Indian Express. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Vikas Singh, I'd like to come to you first. Do you think that this proposed ordinance, in the form in which it has been announced, it will be able to, overcome the Supreme Court's decision, last month's decision, which said that all these allocations had been illegal and arbitrary? I think there's a problem with the audio there. Mr. Razdan, if you have heard the question, the same question, can you answer that, please?
Hello?
Yeah, Mr. Razdan.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello?
I can hear you, Mr. Razdan.
Yes, I have not read the fine print of the ordinance except what has been reported in the press.
Right.
I think, first of all, the government has tried to bring on the table something that would meet the 6-month deadline for the control of these mines to pass over to the new entities.
Right.
It is certainly a race against time. The issue of the auction being a procedure that is permissible in the light of the overall judgment of the Supreme Court is something, I think, which the law officers of the country would have examined. And that is why I think there are two amendments to previous enactments of the government that are in position.
Right.
That be so. The other issue is of land. I think land which is proposed to be taken over, there would be implications. I suppose which Land Acquisition Act provisions would apply. Would you be going over the present legislation on the subject, or would there be a special dispensation? Because there's the Coal Bearing Areas Acquisition Proceedings Act, then there is the Land Acquisition Act. So all these acts would also have to be taken care of probably, because I do not see that some of the parties would willingly accept to what the liquidator or evaluator would determine.
Right.
The other issue is that they've said that the proceeds from the auction would go on to the state government. Now that obviously is, I would also say, expediency, because otherwise the state governments may have objected to some of the provisions.
Right.
But personally speaking, in the long term, I would have liked such mining projects to incorporate a provision that a certain substantial portion of the revenues or the royalties in future should go to those particular areas, local areas from where mining is done, so that the direct benefits can flow in perpetuity to the people who are inhabiting those areas or who are directly affected by them.
I think that's a very important point you made.
Now, there is one...
I'll come back to you, Mr. Razdan.
Yes.
Mr. Razdan will come back.
Girish, there is one point that I have read in today's paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, please finish that point.
And that is, you see that the end-use plants are also going to be open to auction.
Right. End-use, okay.
This is not what was mentioned 2 days back. So,
end-use plants will also be
a new item on the agenda.
Okay. Let me get Mr. Vikas Singh on this.
Well, it is reported in the Economic Times I read today.
Okay. Mr. Vikas Singh, my question to you is this. that this ordinance which has been which is going to be promulgated, of which we have heard from the finance minister and the coal minister before this, you think that this satisfies the Supreme Court's, or this would satisfy the Supreme Court, which had held all those allocations invalid? And there are already some voices being heard that this is going against the Coal Nationalization Act of 1973.
Well, according to me, the present government has behaved very irresponsibly in this matter right from the start. Firstly, the government was given an opportunity when the Supreme Court had initially said that all these licenses needs to be cancelled. They had given an opportunity to all parties to say as to which of these coal blocks can be continued and which can be, finally cancelled. I think that was a great opportunity for the government to have contended that all those coal mines which have been allocated to power, units which are going to generate power, and if that power is going to come into the distribution system, that is, if it is going to the distribution networks, then they should have justified all those allotments by saying that they are at par with the UMPPs. Because what is UMPP? UMPP is a allotment where the allotment has taken place, where the rate at which power is to be supplied is by competitive bidding.
Right.
Now, if you were to look into the regulatory regime with regard to power.
Sorry, Mr. Vikas Singh. Mr. Vikas Singh.
Wherever there is a power being.
Mr. Vikas Singh, sorry.
Yes.
You were saying that they should have gone at. I think during the hearing in the Supreme Court, there were pleas from the Attorney General and the government saying that please allow at least 42 of these blocks to continue, don't cancel them. But apparently the Supreme Court did not.
Why 42? I say because even the original Supreme Court judgment did not find anything wrong in allotment in favor of a private company also, which was into generation of power. Now, even with regard to those 42, if you recall, in the final day of hearing, the Attorney General simply gave up even those 42. He says, I'm not concerned, you do whatever, it will not have any impact on the economy or on the nation or on the generation of power. That was a very irresponsible statement to make. And I'll tell you that if they had only made a plea, because Mr. Venugopal's arguments were noticed and he had made very elaborate arguments with regard to how it is going to affect the nation as a whole and the banking sector in particular. Okay. But all that has been brushed aside only by one sweep, saying that Attorney General says it is not going to have any impact. Now, firstly, it was irresponsible, according to me, even on the part of the Supreme Court, to accept Attorney General like this, when the earlier Attorney General had kept on crying that no, it will have a huge impact on the economy. That argument was rejected. And the present Attorney General's argument was accepted without any basis, without any justification, without any argument, without any
so you think, Mr.
According to me, they lost that first opportunity. Can I just complete that? They lost that first opportunity which they could have, sort of got. And Supreme Court, I'm sure, would have considered not cancelling those blocks where the coal blocks are for dedicated power plants and the power is going into the distribution system, because the distribution system is again before a regulator, where the power at which the supply is to be made to the people of this country is determined by the regulator. So the generator is really speaking in a cost plus regime, and if coal is being given to him at a very cheap rate or at free of cost, then ultimately the beneficiary are the people of India.
Right.
Now, this is something which the Supreme Court should have been told, and I'm sure if the Supreme Court had been properly informed, they would have left all. Now, that is one. Secondly, even in this ordinance, I find that ultimately generating money is not the only idea when you are dealing with infrastructure. Now, if these coal blocks are taken at auction and at a heavy price, then ultimately who will pay this price? This price will be paid by the people of India. Now, who has considered the plight of the people of India? Unfortunately, the petitioners before the Supreme Court have no idea, or probably are deliberately doing this for some oblique motives, but have no idea of what ultimately the people of India are going to suffer because of this judgment. It is said to be a public interest litigation, but it is definitely anti-public interest litigation.
Mr. Vikas Singh,
Mr. Vikas Singh, and if that is the basis for the...
So, Mr. Vikas Singh, you're saying that the auction route which is being envisaged is not the best way to do it. We are joined in now by Mr. Ajay Dua, former Secretary in the Union Ministry of Industry and Commerce. Mr. Dua, how do you look at this, is this the best way the government could have found in the present circumstances?
I think so. The government has addressed a very limited issue. The issue arising out of cancellation of 214 blocks by the Supreme Court of India, of which the ordinance is dealing with the blocks which were under production or about to go into production. And to that 32, another 32 blocks have been added, which the government thinks are ready to go into production. Yeah. That means 74 blocks. And I think the entire genesis of this case was, why didn't the government auction the other blocks as well?
Exactly.
And now that particularly after 2012, when the rules, or say after 2010, when the MMDR Act had been amended to allow for auctioning, I think this particular ordinance is addressing a very limited issue, the issue arising out of the Supreme Court judgment. It is not, and I emphatically say it is not here addressing all the issues concerning the coal sector. Addressing the Coal Nationalization Act, the issues arising out of needing to address commercial mining, etc., those I presume would follow.
Would follow. So this is, you think that this is just confined to, Mr. Razdan was pointing out earlier that they're racing against time, that 6 months Supreme Court's deadline. Absolutely. Which they have, they're trying to. Yes, Ashish. Ashish, you think that this is, would you agree that this is the best way?
Yeah. First of all, Girish, just a piece of unsolicited advice. Mr. Vikas Singh gave a monologue and raised some queries about the credentials of the petitioners and said he attributed motives. I think there should be a disclosure. If I'm not wrong, Mr. Vikas Singh represented some of the companies which were prime beneficiaries of coal scam. So there should be a disclosure that he was a legal counsel of some of those companies which are accused of crony capitalism.
I was a legal counsel for NTPC.
Yes, sir.
I was legal counsel for two companies, NTPC and a UP power generating company. So I'm making that disclosure, Mr.
You are an interested party. Anyway.
He represented the government.
I was representing National Thermal Power Corporation.
Now,
and I was representing UP Rajkiya Rupi.
That's fine.
Okay, Mr. Vikas Singh, I think you have clarified. You represented government organizations, right?
The larger point here is, why were these coal blocks cancelled in the first place? These coal blocks were cancelled because they were allocated for rent seeking, they were allocated for crony capitalism, they were kickbacks, they were all illegal, unconstitutional, allocated in an opaque manner to non-serious players.
In the judgment, there is not a mention also of any kickback.
Please don't interrupt me, I didn't interrupt you. So why have these coal blocks been allocated? Mr. Vikas Singh maybe is wiser than the Supreme Court.
Don't mention about it.
So don't interrupt me, sir.
No, you also
what I am saying is that the Supreme Court of India, the Apex Court of India, has found that the allocation process was illegal and opaque, right? And there was rent seeking happening in the allocation of coal blocks. Now the proof of the pudding will lie in the eating.
Right.
Both Congress and NDA, both Congress and BJP have had their cronies. We have CAG reports from... No, one second.
Ashish,
I'm talking about the limited point.
As far as the ordinance is concerned, you think there has been that's the right
ordinance,
step,
as
or
I
you
said,
have a problem with
the proof of the pudding will lie in the eating.
Right.
I have to see the implementation of this ordinance. There should not be any cartelization. The government should ensure that the crony should not try to enter the same route and get the same benefits through the back door, through the back door of the e-auction. That's my limited point.
Okay, Mr. Dua, you think
but
that...
But on the face of it, it's a welcome move.
You think Ashish doubt that, there could be some way in which the cronies and crony can come to the back door. Do you think from the limited, whatever we know as of now about the ordinance, that there is that possibility?
I think you can't rule that out because there is a restriction that only end users
Right.
can apply for or take part in this e-auction,
Right.
apart from those who've been convicted, etc. And those are going to be a very handful of people. And the fact is, what is on offer is not just the coal mine. The cost
Also
of
the
it
cost.
is going to be fairly high because the land. Then the downstream assets which have been built on
Exactly.
it. And also, there could be the same set of people who have to raise huge debts from the banks.
Right.
That they would be interested in applying for these and offering higher prices. So the competition may not be extremely large.
Subhomoy, would you agree with that? See, the whole thing, this whole auction process is now based on the presumption that there is going to be good competition. People will come with the highest bid. The highest bidder will get this. That is the presumption on which this whole thing has been now formulated. You think that they will be able to succeed in that?
No, whether they'll succeed in that will have to come after a fairly large other issues are sorted out. First of all, these coal blocks will now go under auction under the MMDR route.
Correct.
The Supreme Court order was about no auction or nothing, no process can be taken on till Coal Mines Nationalization Act has been reworked.
Has been amended.
That is an issue that has not been sorted out.
No, this
so
whole,
there is,
you
so,
finish it.
so from 1993, all the blocks that were given
Have been
are, as the Supreme Court said, fatally flawed.
Right.
And they're fatally flawed because the Coal Mines Nationalization Act does not allow for any
Private
block
operators.
any block to be given out which is not through the Coal India route.
Right.
In other words, because the ownership of all coal blocks under the Coal Mines Nationalization Act rests not with the center but with the Coal India.
Right.
So that's the first thing that will have to be resolved when it comes again with the Supreme Court, that whether the MMDR route itself, which was taken up, through which coal was brought in, whether that is right. To me, this is an issue that will need to be sorted out. We haven't heard the last word on it as yet.
Right.
The second part is auction by itself is always a welcome procedure. It should be done. Whether there will be cartelization or not is an issue that can always be sorted out by the way an auction is structured. For instance, in the telecom sector, we have clock auction, which means that everybody participates together.
They're talking of a reverse auction here.
Yeah, that's right. The e-auction process is actually a very viable and a very robust auction mechanism. The earlier auction procedure, which was there, was that every company would send in something like a tender, and then it'll be opened, and then it'll be classified, and then the bids will be clear. Here, the e-auction makes it much more robust,
transparent,
because nobody gets a chance to bid and say that I couldn't match somebody else's bid because I didn't get to see. Because the e-auction process can continue till a fair price has come through. Now, which sort of companies will come in and all can always be sorted out. If the administrative mechanism, Mr. Dua has been in the government, Mr. Razdan has been in the government, they know it can always be worked out to the satisfaction of people, and that those issues can be taken care of.
Yes, very quickly before I go to Mr. Razdan.
I just want to say one thing, that the Supreme Court has cancelled the allocations to captive mines, to 214 of them, because these were under the amendments made to the Coal Nationalization Act.
Right.
For captive 3 times, adding them. Whereas the government right now has moved under the MMDR Act, where auctioning has been prescribed as an option. There is an option of auctioning. So the Supreme Court has not yet looked at this subject at all. What was before it was the allocation made prior to 2010.
This is the problem.
This has to be sorted out.
This has to be sorted out.
It has nothing to do with the coal nationalization. It doesn't come under the coal.
The entire screening committee procedure was taken up subsequent to the amendment to the Coal Mines Nationalization Act of 1993. The government's current decision is based on application of the MMDR Act, under which coal has been brought in for some limited purposes. This is an issue which has not been looked at by the Supreme Court in 6 months later. This is an issue that they will have to look at and see whether the government has the right and is going the proper way to go in for this auction.
I just want to add one
very
thing
quickly
to it,
because I want
clarification. I don't think under the Act, either of the 2 acts, the coal block or coal assets belong to the Coal India. Coal India has 429 coal blocks allotted to it by the government. The rest of them belong to the people of India. That means the government of India.
Absolutely.
And
Mr.
yes.
Razdan and Mr. Razdan and Vikas Singh. One second.
Except 4 coal blocks which were given through competitive bidding. All 214 coal blocks have been cancelled.
Exactly.
So coal blocks given to even government PSUs, state government PSUs, further given through joint ventures, all have been cancelled.
Exactly.
Just 4 blocks which were given through, either given to NTPC or given through competitive bidding have not been cancelled.
Mr. Razdan,
No,
Mr.
cancellations have
Razdan,
nothing to do with this.
Mr. Razdan, how do you look at this? You know, these complications are still there. So how do you think the government will be able to overcome this?
I had raised this issue sometime earlier also, that it would be appropriate if we are very sure whether this mode is going to be the legal mode. We do not want to be in a mess after 6 months. It would probably be right even that if we can move a special reference to the Supreme Court if permissible, whether this scheme of things as being put forward by the government comes within the ambit of the present laws and the various laws which are in operation, because it is too precious a commodity for allowing it to go into legal courtrooms for long. I think if the law of the land is saying something, the government in the best of its intentions is trying to provide a mechanism by which coal can now be provided to the end users. I think it may not be a bad idea to make a reference to the Supreme Court and say this is the procedure we want to go by, please put your stamp on it.
Okay.
Because the Supreme Court said not only were those allocations illegal, they were also arbitrary. I didn't read rent seeking anywhere, with all due apologies.
Right.
But even if it was transparent, it would have been illegal nevertheless.
In any
So
case,
that
there
is
are
what bothers me at times.
as far as
it
rent
may
seeking
be appropriate.
Okay, as far as rent seeking is concerned, there are separate cases.
by the CBI.
No, there are separate cases which the CBI
Supreme Court doesn't have to
CBI is handling.
comment on it.
It has not come into this. I'll let me get Mr. Vikas.
Why are we
Mr.
missing the
Vikas
wood
Singh.
for the trees?
Mr. Vikas
No,
Singh.
Girish, one other point.
Okay.
One other point. I think what Vikas may like to clarify is that I think he was talking only of those coal blocks allotted for sale of power through regulated tariff and not the ones for merchant power.
Okay. Mr. Vikas Singh, can you please address what Mr. Razdan said, that is there a need for a special reference to the Supreme Court because there are too many there seems to be too many complications. It's not as simple as the finance minister or the government has made us believe.
Well, I'll just answer about the merchant power, the point that he raised first, and then
quickly,
I'll come to
sir,
that
we're running out of time. I want you to quickly address this.
The power plants, the power plants, most of them are actually through the having long-term PPAs with the distribution companies, but there could be a clause which could have been inserted which said that this benefit will apply only if it is supplied to the DISCOM, so that it is through the regulated tariff. Number one. Number two. On the question of auction, I'm again on the larger issue. The point that we have to go back to the Supreme Court for a reference is again an unending thing. I think that this is absolutely unnecessary, and I think the best way forward is to say firstly that Supreme Court had no business to get into policy matters, because
it's too late
whether
now.
You want to auction an asset of this nature or don't want to auction should be something which should be exclusive domain of the government.
But Mr. Vikas Singh, it's already been settled.
Not auction.
It has already been decided now. There's no point in going back on that. What do we do with this?
I'm trying to say that that's why I'm saying that this ordinance is not really addressing the real issue. If you were to decide, I'll give you a very simple example.
Very quickly,
Tomorrow,
sir.
there are roads where you can build roads on the basis of a toll. You can build. Can I just give you an example and it will clarify things? There could be roads built where you could collect a toll and recover the cost of making the road, or you could have a road where you feel that this is our infrastructure, where this is a backward area. I don't want to collect toll from the people. I want general development on this area. Now, isn't this an overall larger policy decision? If you want to develop a road without collecting coal, can you say that this decision is bad because it's providing for infrastructure without recovery of the money that you spend for that infrastructure? Today, power is a basic infrastructure of this country. And to take
then.
the e-auction route, what you are going to do ultimately, you are going to, this is bound to be added into the tariff. And if it is added into the tariff, then it will be definitely, in the long run, it will be completely anti-progressive, and it will take the country backward.
Okay. Yeah,
Can I just make a quick point? I'm a little surprised by some of the comments
common
made
man
by...
is not able to afford.
I'm a little surprised by...
Ashish,
Yeah, no,
stick to the
industry
point.
subsidizing
Don't get into
the
it. Girish,
Don't get
just-
into the argument with him.
agriculturist today.
Okay, Mr. Singh, thank you.
I'm just saying, I'm a little surprised by some of the comments made by my fellow panelists. They are making it seem like there was no genesis and there's no backdrop to this coal block cancellation process. There's a CAG report, there's a PIL, and the root of the PIL was what?
Nobody is trying to cover that up.
Natural resources of this country
Absolutely.
have to be used for the larger good of the public.
Did not know what
Public
they were
interest
saying.
has to be preserved.
Mr.
And that's why I'm saying
And
we have to see
CAG
whether
is
this
not meant to
process will
comment on
preserve the
policy
public
issues.
interest.
Okay,
That's all.
Mr. Dua, my question is,
Yes.
there is also fear that this is leading to commercialization of the private miners coming into it. In fact, the coal minister made a mention of it, that there will be some enabling provision in the ordinance. You think that is something which will go against the Coal Nationalization Act? I want you to also address it very quickly.
Probably there was no need to mention that. I look at it that way, because this issue was, this ordinance is to address the issues arising out of the Supreme Court judgment. But the government, by putting this on, I think is testing waters.
Testing what? Subhomoy?
Yeah, basically, because unless you change the Coal Mines Nationalization Act,
Right. You can't bring...
the same act can't nationalize and the same act can't denationalize.
So
There can't be an amendment to that act. That act will then have to be abrogated. That is the basic thing. And as far as the auction process is concerned, as I said, it can be fair enough. But just to point out, Mr. Dua, the Coal Mines Nationalization Act did say equate the state with the Coal India. The 1973 Act, and that position has not been changed.
I think
that is the only one.
That's
so
right.
that's why
That's
all
right.
coal blocks
We are
stand with
completely
coal.
run out of time. The heat which this debate has generated today only indicates that there are still a lot of loopholes here, and there may be problems which may come up in the future, legal problems which may come up in the future also, and how fair the auction is also going to be. There are some doubts which have already been expressed about it. We'll wait and watch how it will all proceed. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Anil Razdan, Vikas Singh, Mr. Dua, Ashish Khetan, and Subhomoy Bhattacharya. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, The Big Picture, same time on Friday. Meanwhile, have a great Diwali.